This episode of the Jack Tomczak Show is brought to you by Scott Schulte and High 10 Service in Coon Rapids. Visit high10service.com to schedule your vehicle's appointment. That's high10service.com.
It's the Jack Tomczak Show.
Welcome back to the Jack Tomczak Show. In studio, Washington County Attorney Pete Orput. Hi, Pete.
Hi, Jack. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, but it's really great to see you again.
It is great to see me. I'm also doing well. All right. You and I have talked before, and I know that we can talk about a million topics, so we just might do that. But let's start with the thing I tried to book you to talk about back when it happened, you leaving the Kim Potter case because of Nakima Levy-Pounds and her, how did you put it, extreme assholism?
Yeah, it's not activism, it's assholism.
That was bleeped out for the radio version of this, so you're okay. We're both okay. Nobody's getting fired today. Walk me through it. For what people know, Kim Potter was the 26-year veteran cop in Brooklyn Center, and she thought she was tasing Dante Wright, and she had her firearm in her hand, not a taser, and ended up shooting him, and he's dead. And Mike Freeman, that happened in Hennepin County, he asked you to prosecute that, and then Nakima fired up her troops and made your life miserable.
Yeah, well, Jack, it's an interesting story and how it began. I don't want to get into the facts necessarily because it's set for trial in November, so I don't want to jinx anything. But Dante Wright was shot, I think, Sunday evening. Monday morning, Mike Freeman called me and asked me if I would take the case because we had an informal agreement among all the Metro prosecutors that if we have an officer-involved shooting case, just for the perception of things, we should farm it out to somebody else. In other words, if one of my deputies in Washington County shoots somebody, I'd ask Ramsey County to take it. And
because as a county attorney, you work with the police on things. So for you to be prosecuting an entity or an individual that you've worked with before, may work with in the future, there may be a conflict of interest. So just to make sure there isn't, you kick it out to somebody else.
That's right. Okay. And we all agreed to do that. And so I'd already done one for Hennepin County, but it didn't get any notice. And then he called, and he was insisting on giving it to me as a conflict. So he's conflicted out. He has nothing to do with it. But he did tell me that I could use his victim witness coordinator, and which is helpful because I know the woman. I worked in Hennepin myself for 6 years, and she's wonderful. So at any rate, I asked a guy in my office who's a close friend of mine, Imran Ali. Imran was director of East Metro Human Trafficking Task Force, and I asked him if he wouldn't mind trying this case with me. And he thought, yeah, what a challenge. And it would have been a challenge. It would have been tough. But we agreed to do it. We met with the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. They showed us virtually everything that happened is on body cams. Okay. And so when the trial goes, you'll be able to see exactly what we saw. And I can't wait, frankly. So he was drafting the complaint, and a complaint is simply a statement of probable cause that we have evidence to hold this person to a trial. Okay. So it's usually a page or a page and a half or two that encapsulates the whole case, and then we bring it before a judge, and they say, well, based on what you said in there, I'm going to issue the complaint warrant, which is what he did. He drafted that, and I started doing research, and what I found was there have been 13 cases across the United States where an officer accidentally shot somebody with a gun thinking it was a taser. And I found all 13. 10 of them never got prosecuted by the prosecutor's office. I think they just considered it a mulligan and went, well, that was a mistake. He didn't mean to do it. But 3 of them did. And the 3 that did all went as second-degree manslaughter. And that was exactly the charge I thought that fit. Culpable negligence. You killed somebody and you were culpably negligent in doing it. And that was the theory. So Imran gets the complaint drafted, 1-count second-degree manslaughter, and we contact our victim witness gal and ask her to get a hold of Dante Wright's family so we can have a meeting. I wanted to discuss with them the charge before they read it in the paper, and that was important to me. So we were trying to hurry because at the time Brooklyn Center was burning,
Yep.
and we really needed to get that complaint out quick. So we made sure we'd have it out by that Wednesday morning. So Tuesday, we're working on the case. We're getting it ready. And then the victim witness advocate called and said she's got a meeting with the family and their attorneys because Ben Crump was in town for the Chauvin trial, and he also is representing them. So Imran and I go downtown Minneapolis, meet with in a law firm, and there are 13 lawyers, 13 civil rights lawyers. And the meeting starts with one of them from Chicago saying, look, we really believe this is a second-degree manslaughter. And I looked around and I thought, I thought you guys were going to argue for something else. And I go, no, it's second-degree manslaughter. And I think they thought I wasn't even going to prosecute it, but I was real clear about prosecuting it. Whether I like it or not.
So this group of attorneys for the victim's family, Dante Wright's family, they came up with the same thing you came up with.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then they did it before me.
Okay.
The guy from Chicago goes, before we even begin, we just want to tell you, we believe this is second-degree manslaughter. Well, I'm sitting across the table from Mr. Crump, and I went around and I said, do all you lawyers agree with that? Everybody did, including Mr. Crump. Yes, I agree. It's second-degree manslaughter. Then I gave my condolences to the family. I told them how things are going to go. We left the meeting. About an hour and a half later, Imran calls me at home and says, turn on your TV, look at the news. Ben Crump's up in Brooklyn Center banging on a podium saying, Kim Potter intentionally killed Dante Wright. She intentionally killed him and got the crowd all riled up.
Yep.
Well, it gets even better. So we draft that complaint, and what we did was essentially just narrated what we saw on the body cam, step by step by step. And after she shot Dante Wright, she turned and fell to the ground and started wailing about, I can't believe I shot him. My life is over. My life is over. I can't believe I shot him. I meant to tase him. Well, none of that got put out. When the chief put out the body cam, it was just right up to where she shot him in the back. Okay. And it was poignant. And I thought, this is going to be tough. Juries are going to feel really sorry because they're watching her watch her life go by, and so to speak. And so we filed a complaint, but we have to do it through the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. Well, Mike Freeman got a hold of the complaint before it got filed and made some edits to it and edited out all the part after the shooting, where the things she said, how she was wailing and saying, I can't believe I did this, that kind of stuff. And so the complaint read really anodyne. You know,
don't use big words with me.
Okay,
what does anodyne mean?
It means just clean. It was, and then she shot him, period. So he made 3 edits to the complaint, and that spun my life out of control.
Have you had words with Mike Freeman?
I have. But and he did it because he was afraid that Nakima Armstrong would react if I put in there what really happened. And what really happened is an excited utterance from a witness that's pretty relevant. And that all got cut out. And then the protests started. And it was tough. It was really tough. And one Sunday afternoon, I usually have my grandkids over for dinner on Sundays. That went by the wayside for the last few months. But
so this you described the week where it started with the shooting happened on Sunday. Freeman kicks it to you on Monday. You met with the family on Tuesday. And so at what point in this did people start showing up at your house?
Well, then Wednesday the complaint got filed, but I didn't realize until later that it had been edited and a lot of relevant information had been taken out. And so then the following Sunday in the afternoon, I got a call from the sheriff saying there's a caravan of 40 cars coming to your house. Sheesh. And I went, what? He goes, yeah, and we're not going to interfere. Okay, well, they came to my house. It's in Stillwater. It's in the North Hill, a working-class neighborhood. They closed both ends of the street, the block. And,
the protesters did.
Yeah, and so nobody could get in or out. Neighbors couldn't leave. Neighbors couldn't get in. They set up chairs, a podium, loudspeakers, and go after me. And name-calling, demanding I charge murder. Because I'm a damned Irishman, I went out there and thought, I'm going to try to talk to him.
Oh, never do that.
No, Jack. That was a lapse in my ethics because I thought it might be ethical to go out there and say, well, look, I'm willing to talk to you. But there is no talking.
They don't want, people don't want, when they say they want to talk, they don't want to talk.
No, they don't.
No,
and
people want to feel, and they want to feel out loud.
And I learned that real quickly. And, the accusations were, you're way too pro-cop to handle this case. And I said, of course I'm pro-cop. I've been working with him for 35 years. Mm-hmm. We're, teammates. At the same time, I've prosecuted more police officers for felonies than I think any other prosecutor right now in the state.
That was the thing that made in the Byron Smith case up in Little Falls, what made you such a great choice to prosecute that, because you're also pro-gun.
I am pro-gun.
And you're pro-people protecting themselves in their homes. So to have you prosecute Byron Smith, that's ideal.
Well,
because
the Byron
if
Smith
anyone was
case,
going to be weird about that or let him off the hook, it'd be a guy who's pro-gun and pro-self-defense.
You're right.
And you didn't. You shot it fairly.
In the Byron Smith case in Little Falls, that's where two teenagers allegedly were breaking into this guy's house, and he shot and killed him.
I've got a great interview of us on Facebook. I'll find that and make it top of the page.
When you look into the facts of the case, this was a pre-planned murder.
Absolutely.
And he did it well. And everybody gave me a lot of flack after that conviction, saying, how could you do that to a little old man when he's being harassed by teenagers? I go, that's not the case I tried.
That's not what happened, nope.
I said, if you learn what I presented, and the jury, they took 10 minutes. And they went, this is, but it worked out. It worked out there. And in this case, I'm trying to explain, look, I've held a lot of cops accountable for thefts, for arson, for all kinds of things, and I can do it here. No, you can't. Well, and then interestingly enough, the head of the Council of Islamic American Relations is standing next to her, and I looked at him and said, so you're demanding that my partner and I get removed from the case? Yeah. Well, my partner is, I think, one of two Muslim prosecutors in the state of Minnesota. He's an Islamic prosecutor. He's a Pakistani American. He's as American as me, but he's Muslim. And you are saying the Council of Islamic American Relations is demanding he be taken off the case because he can't be fair. What does that say about you? Well, he just gave me the dumb look, and and that's where we left it.
All right, let's take a very quick break. We will come back. I'm talking with Washington County Attorney Pete Orput on AM 1280, The Patriot. Ad break. If you haven't joined my Patreon yet, you are missing out. I'm giving away trinkets to all my supporters. If you want a trinket with my name on it, go to jacktomczak.com. That's Tomczak, spelled the super confusing way. Welcome back to the Jack Tomczak Show. I'm talking with Washington County Attorney Pete Orput. We're talking about him removing himself from the Kim Potter case, the shooting of Dante Wright in Brooklyn Center a few months ago. All right, Pete, where we left off, the protesters, within a week of the shooting happening, have occupied your neighborhood, and they're demanding that you be removed from the case, and your deputy, your assistant,
one of my assistants.
One of your assistants is a Muslim guy, and the council wanted Council of American and Islamic Relations want him and you taken off the case.
Yeah,
that doesn't seem to make sense to me.
Nor me.
Yeah.
Well, and then after a few hours, they left, and then a few days later, I think it was a Friday, they came back. Less of a crowd this time, but nonetheless, I'd say 20 to 30 people with a van, with loudspeakers, chairs, podium. And it was demanding I charge murder. And I tried the earlier time to explain to them that I couldn't, and that was a waste of my time. But it just became vitriolic, and my yard would get littered with car air fresheners, ostensibly because there was some word that the cops stopped the guy because he had an air freshener hanging down. And he did, but that isn't why they stopped him. But nonetheless, so they go and they throw air fresheners all over, put bumper stickers on my car in the driveway, signs in the yard. Okay, that's part of the deal. And I thought, well, maybe they won't come back. No, maybe they will.
Yeah.
And in fact, they did 2 more times. But in the meantime, when they weren't there, when Nakima Armstrong and her coterie of miscreants, when they weren't there, up comes a truck and about 5 guys. One of them is Damon Wright, Dante's brother.
Okay.
And he's got a loudspeaker and orange strobe lights going at my windows. And he gets there about 3:30 in the afternoon. He's going to stay all night till it's dark. 5 of them on a loudspeaker, demanding I come out, demanding I charge murder. And, I call the police and I talk to the police chief. And the chief says, well, Pete, you're going to probably have to do what Mike Freeman did and sell your house and move. You're not going to do anything about this? You're going to do nothing? My neighbors are upset. They're very upset. And they're upset with me as though I'm the cause. And will you please get these people out of there? No, I won't. Okay.
Because they're on public property.
Yeah, and then but it's
even
disorderly.
On public property, there's all kinds of things.
It's
right?
a noise ordinance. It's loudspeakers going at night when people are trying to put their kids down. Orange strobe lights in my windows. It's a pattern of harassment. It's a noise ordinance violation. It's disorderly conduct. It's all kinds of things.
I probably break the law like 30 times a day without knowing it. I'm sure the police and the lawyers could find laws, ordinances, things that they're doing wrong.
Well, and I talked to the mayor and said, look, almost every city in Washington County has adopted a residential protest ban ordinance. So the ordinance would say you can protest reasonable time, place, and manner, but you can't do it in front of people's homes. I know Hugo, Oakdale, Woodbury, they all have. And the mayor didn't want to do it. And 2 of the councilmen said they were all for it, and the mayor said no. So I never got any relief from that, and the police never did anything. And in the meantime...
Do you know if there was a residential protest ban in Hugo when now...
No, there wasn't.
There
was
one
after that.
Yeah.
Bob Kroll, when his house got protested. Then they soon thereafter did that. And most of the communities in the metro have. But at any rate, and I find out it's Damon Wright. I didn't know who it was at first. And I called the chief and said, you got to tell Wright that I cannot come out and confront him. That's what he wanted. Because he's represented by counsel. Because Crump and his law firm represent the whole family. Not just Dante.
So in that situation, I'm not a lawyer. You can't talk to them. You have to talk to their lawyer?
If somebody's represented by a lawyer, I may not talk to them. Not one bit.
Huh.
I got to go through their lawyers. So I called a Minneapolis lawyer a couple times and said, would you get this kid off my back? I'm trying to get his brother some justice. Why would he come after me?
Yeah.
But finally I got the police chief to go and I said, you don't have to roust him. Just tell him I can't talk to him and I won't. And he did, and finally Wright went away. I then called my advocate and said, I need to meet with this family. I got to get this to stop. And she called me back and said, family refuses to meet with you. They want nothing to do with you. And I said, well, then I have to get off the case. If I don't have my victims supporting me, how can I prosecute a case?
Yep.
And I immediately called Freeman and said, it's yours back. And then he sent it over to Attorney General Ellison's office, and they looked at it for several months and added a first-degree manslaughter charge. And good luck to him.
What is so not murder?
No.
And you wanted second-degree manslaughter, and Ellison is going to do first-degree manslaughter. What is the difference?
Well,
for us non-lawyers out there,
it's the penalty's more severe, obviously.
Sure.
2 or 3 more years in prison, putatively. I'm not sure what the thinking is there. I think I know, but I don't know, so I don't want to jinx it, especially with the trial coming up. But they think they've got enough to get a first-degree manslaughter, and I welcome them to do it. I do strongly believe that Kim Potter did something that she has to be held to account for. In some regards, it's like these cases, and we get them every other couple of years. Guy's out deer hunting, and he shoots Uncle Joey riding a horse and goes, well, I thought he was a deer. Well, wait a minute now.
Yeah.
That's so negligent, and you got to be held to account for that kind of negligence.
So you got kids?
Yeah.
Pete?
3.
They're grown-ups now?
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I have difficulty with my kids is like certainly when they intentionally do something bad, they get punished. But I wrestle with when they make a stupid mistake, what's the proper response to that? Because they didn't mean to do it, but they need to know that they got to stop and think before they act.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I mean,
and if you don't correct that, especially in children, they just keep making stupid decisions the rest of their lives.
I think we all need to be held to account for our behavior,
Yep.
all of us, all the time. And when people do something stupid or dumb or
Make a mistake.
impulsive or make a mistake, that can be a moment where you can learn from it, and you don't necessarily have to punish someone. But there are some mistakes that are so big that that's not true.
Yeah.
That you can't say, oh, it was a mistake, I guess I'm dumb, when you kill somebody.
Right.
You went too far with that.
Yep.
And so there needs to be accountability, and I'm okay with that.
And there's a reason that cops get the guns and the cars and the hats and the uniform and they get to do more things than a regular person does.
Mm-hmm.
But with that, we expect better judgment.
We do. I do. I think the public does.
Yeah.
We give them a great deal of discretion, and we ask them to use it very, very wisely, especially in using force. The Chauvin case is a classic example. What made the Chauvin case so mordant, in my view?
Mordant, what does that mean,
It's
Pete?
just so incisive, and so I couldn't believe it happened is, if you recall, George Floyd's trying to pass a obviously counterfeit $20 bill.
Mm-hmm.
This is in May of last year. The Hennepin County Jail, along with every other jail in the state, sent out guidelines saying we are not taking low-level offenders. We're in our jail. We're under a COVID crisis. Don't bring property offenders, thieves, that kind of stuff to jail. And I'm talking about $100,000 swindle cases and stuff that we'd have to do it by summons, where you send them a letter telling them to come to court. So it was the rare person that got thrown in jail during the height of COVID last May. And so when I'm watching the video, I go, why are they arresting him? Why are they trying to get him in a squad car? They can't take him to jail. So what's with the fighting? And it was senseless.
Yeah.
I go, you're fighting to get him in a squad car so you can do what? Take him to the jail? They won't take him on a
drive
$20
him downtown and let him out of the car.
I'll give him a ride home. But
Yeah.
I mean, so it got mishandled right from the beginning, and look what happened.
Yeah.
So it's that improper use of the discretion that we give cops that they do need to be held to account for that.
So when you've got, we'll keep with this, low-level offenses.
Mm-hmm.
My opinion of the criminal justice system and reform has been colored recently.
Yeah, mine too.
I think I've learned some things. What things should you put people in jail for?
Well, let me start with this, Jack. Before the Floyd incident, there was a movement of so-called reform. I got to be careful with that word because it means a lot to a lot of people.
Right.
But there was a movement of reform, and what that essentially was, led by a number of prosecutors, Larry Krasner in Philadelphia, Chesa Boudin in San Francisco, the woman in Baltimore, and some other places, right? And what they say is they consider the criminal justice, generally, they consider the criminal justice system too punitive, and so there are a number of classic crimes that they're just not going to do. They're not going to prosecute. And they say those are low-level, nonviolent offenses. We're just not going to do them. Okay. Well, okay. And I guess so. I mean, when I took my oath, I took the oath to uphold all the laws of Minnesota, not just the ones I like. Mm-hmm. And I take a different view. And let me just put that into perspective. There's a concept that came essentially out of New York in the 90s called the broken windows theory.
Yes.
And that came out of a psychologist in Pennsylvania in the late 80s. And the theory is this, and they tried it in Queens. Now, when they started looking into broken windows, New York had 2,500 homicides a year. Wow. And once they instituted broken windows across the city, they had 250. It dropped precipitously. Now, I will say, from everything I've heard, they were a little too aggressive on stopping people and shaking them down and frisking them, and that went too far. But the broken windows concept worked very well. And what that is if you don't hold people to
let me stop you right there because we got a break coming up, and then we'll have you explain that on the other side of the break. I'm talking with Washington County Attorney Pete Orput. We'll be right back on AM 1280 The Patriot. Welcome back to the Jack Tomczak Show. I'm talking with Washington County Attorney Pete Orput, and we're talking about all kinds of things. We left off with criminal justice reform and the broken window theory implemented in you said New York City?
Yeah.
And it resulted in a precipitous drop in serious crime.
Homicides.
Okay, in homicides. Explain what it is.
And other crimes as well.
For people who are not, one sociology class away from a criminology minor. Actually, I'm one statistics class away. So I've taken some classes on this 25 years ago.
Yeah. I might be oversimplifying things, but I think what's come of this is that you've got prosecutors who really...
What is the broken window theory?
Oh, okay. Let me get to that.
You
broken
clamp
windows
down
theory says
on everything, and the increased police presence results in less murders.
It goes like
hopefully.
this. If you let people get away with the little stuff, drinking in public, urinating in public, breaking windows, stealing, shoplifting, if you let them get away with that because you say, well, that's a low-level nonviolent crime, people begin to think that they have impunity and that, well, if I can walk around drinking and urinating in public and stealing from Walgreens, what can't I do? Yeah. And so if you let those little things go, big things follow. So the theory was if we crack down on the little stuff and say we're not going to tolerate criminal activity, big or little, it does stop big criminal activity. Because of police presence, because they're holding people to account. But if you blow that off and you let people do what they want to do because you say, well, it's only a low-level crime, you're going to be in trouble. If you look at, like I say, San Francisco, Chesa Boudin's the DA there. He announced several things, reformed things where he's not going to prosecute these types of crimes and those types of crimes. And what do we see in San Francisco? Walgreens closed 50 drugstores in San Francisco. They closed 50? Why? Wow. Because of rampant thefts, where crews would come in and just clean out shelves and walk away with impunity. Take a look at that on Google,
I've seen the videos.
Yeah, I mean, it's shocking. And you go, okay, well, I still believe strongly that the broken windows theory has been tested, studied multiple times, and I think it's an effective way to do it. Now, are there problems with it? Yeah. If you get too aggressive, like critics said in New York, and you stop too many people and shake them down, that begins to feel and look like harassment. Yeah. And you don't have to do that. But what you have to do is be there and hold them to account, even for the little stuff.
So I interviewed Chuck Samuels with the ACLU a number of years ago back at the other radio station, and we had this conversation. He was talking about spitting ordinances and loitering.
Yeah.
Are those used as, and relevant to the discussion now, is like, are those used for a pretense to harass non-white people?
Oh, it may. I mean, I'm cynical enough to believe it could. I've never seen a loitering charge in 35 years. Never. And or a spitting charge. Spitting, if you spit at a police officer and you hit him, that can be an assault just because of the danger of communicable diseases.
Yeah.
But spitting on the ground, I've never seen a prosecution for that, and I can't imagine anybody be dumb enough to bring one.
Yeah.
So we got to watch out. I mean, people try to dramatize it, and when they do, I think they lose some accuracy. So,
yes.
But to encapsulate things today, and by the way, I'm on the board of the National District Attorneys Association, and the vast majority of us there really do believe in the broken windows theory of fair but firm accountability. And I say that fair, and I also say the word firm. Not everybody needs to go to jail. Mm-hmm. Not everybody needs to have a conviction, but you can hold them to account perhaps less than that. For instance, I get 450 to 500 what's called a fifth-degree drug offense. It's a felony. It's a relatively low felony, but it's a felony. You possess a small amount of typically meth or heroin or fentanyl, sometimes cocaine, rarely marijuana. It would have to be an awful lot of marijuana to ring the bell. Mm-hmm. But we get kid after kid, especially with the methamphetamine and the heroin, and it's just tragic. And my prosecutors and I looked at each other and said, we cannot jail our way out of this problem. Mm-hmm. We just can't. Well, should we just quit arresting them for it and quit charging? And that's what Ramsey County did. They said, we're not going to charge any more fifth-degree drug cases. And as much as I really love John Choi, and he's a close friend, I disagreed.
Ramsey.
I disagreed with him because our strategy in Washington County is this is an opportunity to at least bring an intervention to the mind of the guy or gal that's possessing the drugs. In other words, the police arrest them because they've got a bindle of meth. We put them into our diversion program where they're not going to get a felony conviction, but we do want them to get a CD a chemical dependency evaluation, and follow the recommendations.
Now, Pete, I don't know if you are what you know about my history, but I'm 10 years sober.
Yeah,
and
good for you. Congratulations.
I'm a super expert on addiction.
So am I.
I don't know if you know anything about this.
I do. I know a lot, Jack. I mean, I'm not supposed to tout membership in a certain organization on press or radio, but I go to several meetings a week and have for many, many 24-hour periods.
This is why I don't go to meetings, so I can talk about whatever I want. So you know addiction. You know how people are wired. And I sent you the book that I talked to all my guests about, What Happened to You, by Bruce Perry, Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey. You're not going to jail somebody out of addiction.
Right.
Like, you're not going to find somebody out of addiction.
Right.
So like those things don't work. But giving somebody, for lack of a better term, some chin music, like a wake up, a warning, hey, we've noticed, a first intervention, a something that can be an opening to treatment or therapy or whatever. Okay, that's a long way of saying how do we solve addiction? I've heard you were on the Canadian version of 60 Minutes. I don't know how what that is in metric. 58 hectares. I don't know what they call it up there. But what's the answer to the drug overdose epidemic? You got 2 minutes.
Even before the Chauvin case, I mean, a lot of changes came post-Chauvin, but even before that, I met with our sheriff, our community corrections director, they're the probation agent folks, and our public health people, and I said, I cannot jail my way out of this problem. I can't. Yeah. But we have to come up with a better strategy. And we did. We partnered with Hazelden Foundation and some others and started a program. The acronym is kind of weird. It's called MORE. It's mentally ill and opioid dependent recovery initiative.
But that's a great acronym to get addicts to go along with the program. Hey, you want more?
Yeah.
Of course I do.
Right, that's
how we're
exactly
wired.
right. And it started, and I got everybody to get on board, and it starts in the jail. If you're a heroin addict and you get arrested for a bindle of heroin, you will go through hell in that jail while you go through withdrawal.
Yes.
And I'm not okay with that. They don't deserve that.
When you could die.
Yeah, you could. Not so much with heroin. You'll wish you were dead, but with meth you can.
Okay.
But there are medical responses, and we got our doctors and our nurses trained so that they can identify addicts and offer them Suboxone right in the jail, and then do a warm handoff to a treatment place if they want it. I can't make somebody weigh 900 pounds, but I can give them an opportunity to change their life if they want it. And so I tell them, you're not going to get a conviction, because what would that do? All that'll do is bar you from several jobs, student loans, everything else. But I really do want you to get into recovery. And we take a long view, because people, they'll go into treatment and then they slip. Yeah. Right. And when they slip, I'm still reluctant to give them the felony. I'll give them a stay of adjudication.
Put a pin in that. We will come back at the other side of the break and talk more about this. I'm talking with Washington County Attorney Pete Orput on how to solve the drug overdose epidemic. I'll go back and fix that later.
Sure.
Maybe. Welcome back to the Jack Tomczak Show. I'm talking with Washington County Attorney Pete Orput. At this point in the conversation, we're talking about the drug overdose epidemic. Pete, you and I know a lot about addiction and what works and what doesn't. And you're not going to jail somebody out of addiction. You're not going to find somebody out of addiction. So what is the answer?
Well, to make available treatment. And if you have a loved one that's suffering and you want to get them into treatment, I hope you got a couple of days to be on the phone and go through a labyrinth with your insurance company, with treatment facilities. It's not easy. No. And I hope you have a lot of money, too. But if we get them charged in court, we can access what's called Rule 25 money, where the courts will say, well, I'll pay for his treatment or her treatment or something. And beyond, but they still aren't going to get a conviction. And so we can access Rule 25 money for some folks. For other folks, we can. We've got social workers now in the jail that can hook them up with Medicaid, and we can get funded treatment. The idea is I want no wrong door for an addict in Washington County. If you really are suffering, walk through the door. And I want the door to be the sheriff's office because they do serve and protect.
Okay.
And I know it would seem counterintuitive for a drug addict to go to the sheriff, but we're not there to hassle you. We're there to go, don't make me chase you and catch you. Just walk in the door until you want to surrender, and we'll get you placed in a bed.
That's good to know, and I didn't know that. I don't know if people know that.
COVID hit right when we were ready to
Yeah.
roll it out, so that kind of el-kabonged everything.
When I went to treatment, I was married. Wife had a good job, had insurance, and there was still some, and she worked in healthcare, and there was still some rigmarole in getting me into treatment, and I didn't have a job. I didn't need a job, and I spent my 28 days locked up at Hazelden, and I got to focus on what I was there to do. And after that, I didn't have a job and stress to go back to. I started radio then, and I got plenty of room to figure it out. And not everybody has that.
Right.
Not everybody has the access to treatment and insurance, because Hazelden then, 10 years ago, cost $1,000 a day. Anecdotally, I don't know that for sure.
It's close.
So if you're not in that situation, stable middle class life that you can take a month off and go fix your problems, and then many months after that to continue focusing on your problems, it's going to be tough to kick an addiction.
Yeah.
If all parts of your life are a mess, and if you're on heroin, I don't know if I would have kicked heroin.
It's the most heartbreaking thing you've ever seen in your life. And what I try to tell people in my community is we judge very harshly someone who's a drug addict or what we call substance use disordered, or even an alcoholic. We judge them very harshly. And what I try to tell people is, if your loved one is addicted to heroin, it's not because they woke up one morning and said, I think I want to be a heroin addict. That is not how that drug works.
And it doesn't work like, I hate everybody in my life who loves me.
Yeah.
I'm going to punish them by being a heroin
That's right.
addict.
No, it doesn't, Jack. And when you look at the numbers, and I've researched it very carefully because I put a lot of time into this. In fact, my office was the first among 31 counties and 5 native reservations that were involved in a multi-district lawsuit against Big Pharma, Purdue, and a few of the others for how they marketed opioids. And when you look at it, close to 90% of those who are now currently addicted to fentanyl or heroin, same difference except fentanyl's much stronger, they did so through a doctor's prescription.
Yep.
And if you'll recall a few years ago, I recall it. You go to the dental office and he pulls your wisdom tooth and gives you 40 hits of OxyContin, and they were ubiquitous, the drugs were, and people were taking them. And then the alarm bells started going off when they saw just the absolute massive addiction that has hit this country. A great book is Dreamland about how that started out in Ohio, and it's a disturbing book. But
when Rush Limbaugh, who when he was alive, had more money than God, and more success than most people on the planet, when he's getting hooked on painkillers, they can get anybody.
Well, that's why I say we have to stop the judgments, stop the moral judgments. Like that person's a moral failure or too weak or something like that. It's not about that.
Not at all.
It really, truly is a disease model. Well, while I'm working on that MORE program, I had the pleasure of meeting a number of nonprofit advocates for chemical dependency. And there's a Minnesota Peer Recovery Network, and I really like what they do, and they do wonderful work. And there's another recovery group that Mark Jonigan runs in Minneapolis that's, I think, really good. And they understand and recognize you don't just treat the addiction. You got housing, you got work, you've got a whole plethora of things you need to work on if you really want to support that person. Those programs are out there. The struggle I have is we're still in that 28-day spin dry model where you go up to Hazelden for 28 days and then you're done. That works for guys like me and you. I like my drinking. Well,
so far.
Well, knock wood. You're right. Today anyway.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily help with methamphetamine addicts and opioid addicts. Now, with opioids, we do have medical treatments that can really help and have helped. Not just, I'm not a fan of methadone, but some folks, it does work. But there's Vivitrol and Suboxone, but there's nothing for meth addicts. And 28 days isn't going to do a thing for a meth addict, in my view. It is such a pernicious addiction. And I'm hoping and praying that somebody comes up with some way that we can intervene in their brain so that we can stop that esurient need to get high. And
esurient, what does that mean?
Really
hungry. Do you have a word of the day calendar, Pete? No, of course, you read a lot. That's
normally, I do read a lot, but normally I use helping verbs, but today I'm on the radio, so I don't. So I'm trying to use the King's English. But
so I get such a kick, not a kick, a bad kick. I find it interesting that for the Kim Potter case, Nakima and her folks go after you like you're some kind of monster.
Mm-hmm.
But clearly, you're not. And,
I don't think
there's great compassion here.
I've probably tried more homicide cases than most current prosecutors today. I've spent my life prosecuting bad people. But as a prosecutor, I do more than that. I kind of separate the wheat from the chaff.
Yeah.
And I try to do a reasonable, fair intervention based on what the person did. You know, if they do a violent crime, they owe me for that. If they did something stupid, impulsive, or kid stuff, I don't think they'd be served well by beating the daylights out of them and giving them a conviction. I've got a very good veterans court I set up 10 years ago for dealing with returning combat vets from Iraq and Afghanistan who were getting into all kinds of trouble trying to self-medicate their pain. And my veterans courts put miracles through that program. I've seen guys change that just really encourage me to do more. I've got a juvenile program where I have some people screen the juvenile cases. And out in Washington County, invariably, they're low-level shoplifts, smoking, vaping in school, that kind of truants. We intervene by sending them all down to Youth Service Bureau, which is a social service agency that works with kids that get in that kind of trouble. And, 84% of the kids we send down there we never see again.
Great.
Now, if I could replicate that in adult court, I'd get a Nobel Prize. So we're trying to do the right thing to the right person at the right time. At the same time, since COVID, at least that's when I look back on it, which is back in March 2020, we've seen a significant uptick in crimes. And these are violent crimes. These are,
Why do you think that is?
I'm not sure. I think about it every day. But typically, I've been the Washington County attorney for 11 years. We might get one murder a year, maybe one every 2 years out in Washington County. It's relatively safe. Well, indeed it is. And right now, I think I have 8 homicides in my office. And one of them's a criminal vehicular operation causing death. Another one is fleeing police causing death, where a guy's being chased by the cops and T-bones a little old lady.
Never run from the cops. They'll find you,
no.
And you're going to kill somebody between now and then, so just stop.
The sad part of that is the cop starts to chase the guy because he's in a stolen car, and he immediately goes, that's not a good idea, I'm going to stop. So he quit chasing him. But the knucklehead didn't know that, so he kept driving and ran through a controlled intersection and killed a woman. And then I have a woman that beat her 5-year-old daughter to death. And then I have a guy that stabbed his wife 27 times. And another guy that took a woman out in Scandia and then shot her 3 times and left her in the road. And these kinds of cases have been coming in a lot. Along with, sadly, and I knew it was going to come, the child abuse cases. Because when they closed the schools down and everybody was staying in their home, I looked at my colleagues and said, this is not going to be good. For one, when kids go to school and they have bruises and stuff, that's an opportunity for a teacher to intervene with the school resource officer. But if they're not going, we don't know. But we've seen a significant uptick in child abuse, termination of parental rights cases, which we really don't want to do, but we have to sometimes. And all my colleagues have shared the same experience. They said, yeah, we're just buried. There's a huge backlog because the courts were shut down. My attorneys typically handle about 150 felonies per attorney per year. And right now, due to the backlog and the uptick in crime, they're hovering around 300 files. And that's not okay. That's double where they should be. And it frightens me. I lie in bed at night thinking, what do we do about this? And I'm kind of struggling with it still.
What about overdoses?
Overdoses, I've had, 2020 and 2021 set national records for overdose deaths. And they were already high, 700,000 people. But 2020 and 2021 really blew it up. And I've had 15 right now in my county deaths, and they're always young. It's the saddest thing in the world, Jack. Absolutely. It just rips my heart out when I meet with the parents. But I look at that and go, there's nothing I can do about that young person who was substance abuse disordered and then ultimately died. But I can do a lot with the person who gave it to him, typically sold it to him. And because if somebody's going to make money on a product that is very likely to kill, then they're a player. And if they're a player, I want to play too. And so I go after them. In fact, we've told our police that if you get to a scene of a drug overdose and it's obvious, treat it like a homicide. Okay. I want to know where those drugs came from. And we've been pretty aggressive with it.
We'll take a break. Let's come back. We'll talk more about drugs in Washington County and elsewhere, and we'll see what the person with probably the best judgment I know, Pete Orput, thinks we should do everywhere. You're listening to the Jack Tomczak Show on AM 1280 The Patriot. Welcome back to the Jack Tomczak Show on AM 1280 The Patriot. I'm talking with Washington County Attorney Pete Orput. We left off talking about how if there's a drug overdose, you've instructed your folks to treat it like a homicide. You mentioned earlier the diversion programs that you think work and the help that's out there in the nonprofit world for addicts. For those of us on the right who hate programs and hate spending money, what makes a program work, and what about programs out there that aren't working? I bring this up because there's tens of millions of dollars being spent to fix North Minneapolis, and there has been for a long time, and North Minneapolis is not being fixed. What makes things work and what makes things not work?
I'm no expert in treatment. I know it worked for me. I think I know a lot more about dealing with substance use disordered people because I've had a number of people very generously share their time. Dr. Steve DeLisi at Hazelden, Betty Ford is phenomenal. I've had him come out to the county and teach our managements, and we've learned a lot about addiction. I also hear from my colleagues in Florida that they've seen a huge uptick in treatment mills, where they take your money, sometimes 30, 50 grand, sometimes even more, but it's just they're just churning. Yeah. And I don't think the commitment to doing best practices in treatment is being done. That happens all the time. Every time there's something good, somebody finds a way to criminalize it, and that's going on. But I think what troubles me is the ability to access chemical dependency treatment pretty much on demand. And I also recognize that very, very few people go waltzing into treatment and go, there, I've had enough. I think I'm ready to surrender. Yeah. There needs to be some type of intervention, and I think law enforcement is perfectly suited to do that if they do it right and they do it with compassion. Mm-hmm. And my sheriff totally agreed. He's got 2 deputy sheriffs that are plain clothes that all they do is go to high-risk individuals and keep nudging them to stop the criminal behavior, because the criminal behavior goes along with the drug behavior. And I've been telling people in my community, I am up to my ears in felony shoplifting cases, where you steal over $1,000 from places like Walmart is probably the worst, but Target, Fleet Farm. And we get hundreds and hundreds of felony shoplift cases, hundreds of mail fraud, identity theft. All those crimes often trace back to someone who's an addict. Sure. And I think, well, if I could treat that addiction, they might not go out and steal the living daylights out of everything. Yeah. So instead of chasing them around and throwing them in jail and where the guy or gal will end up doing life on the installment plan, why don't we get right to the root of it? Yes. If we can treat the addiction, I'm convinced those kinds of crimes will go down significantly. And what does that mean? That means we have to have easy access to competent best practices treatment without a lot of barriers. And to do that, you have to think long term. This isn't not 10-day, 28-day. You're talking months. And you're talking about, and I don't like spending money either, especially when it's not mine and when it's the government's. But if we put a little bit of money in and directed it right at the root of the problem, that would, in my view, be a much cheaper than having more and more and more police officers to respond, and then the courts and probation and everything else that's working around the problem, but not really addressing it. So
I'm pro fixing problems.
Me too, and so is my sheriff, and so are my community corrections folks and public health people. We collaborated that MORE program while it got set back due to COVID. It's ramping up, and we're doing, I feel really good about what we're doing. My prosecutors feel really good about what we're doing with these drug offenders, and we think we're making a difference.
You ever watched a Friday the 13th movie with Jason Voorhees, the hockey mask guy?
No.
There's a bunch of them.
I know there are.
Every movie starts out, there's Jason, and there's 10 teenagers. And rather than in the first 5 minutes, the 10 teenagers banding together and eliminating the problem, they spend an hour and a half getting picked off one by one. We don't solve problems as a society. We set up organizations that sometimes treat the symptoms of a problem. But we don't actually get to the root of anything. And if we did that, you do that for a long enough time consistently, you're going to get rid of the problems, the symptoms of that problem. Like people steal so they can buy drugs. People do drugs because they've got some wiring screwed up in their head, probably from when they were a kid. Fix that, and then you won't have people stealing to buy drugs.
Well,
just do that.
But the big impediment to that, Jack, is that it's easier for people to use moral judgments against somebody who's got a substance use disorder and say, that person is weak, he's morally flawed, and I don't care about him. You get what you deserve, and I hear that a lot. So it starts with, I have to change people's minds about that. And when I do, I keep focusing on the public safety aspect. You say, I don't care if that guy uses drugs till he dies. I go, yeah, but do you care about getting your mail? Do you care about not paying higher prices for goods because somebody kept shoplifting stuff? Do you care about those issues? Do you care about a quality of life in your community? If it's not your family, it's your neighbor's family. And if we can drill into it properly, and I'm cynical too, because I've seen a lot of programs come and go, but I think we could really make a difference here. And that's not, the reform prosecutors, they're all in on that, but that's not really a reform thing. That's a look at the problem and go, well, what are we going to do about it? Because I can tell you what doesn't work. And I've prosecuted so many drug offenders, I feel terrible about it because I was missing the mark. And now I think we've learned enough to where we can address those issues. Again, making the public safer by having adequate and good treatment that works, along with the support from the community.
Yeah, like if you don't want somebody who commits crimes because they're addicted to get better, if you don't want that just based on human compassion, just think well, do you want your family vulnerable to that person hurting, robbing, whatever them in order to get money for their next fix? There's a selfish aspect to wanting society to be better, and I'm okay with paying an upfront cost because I really do believe that that's going to reduce costs later down the road, both financially and society-wide.
Well, Jack, I'm a stingy guy, but not when it comes to this. I'd gladly pay my taxes if a portion of it would go directly to treatment. Well, I mentioned earlier that multi-district lawsuit against 4 of the big opioid manufacturers and some of the distributors, AmerisourceBergen, McKesson, that kind of got ground to a halt during COVID, but now meaningful settlement talks are coming, and our Attorney General's working with us, the 31 counties, on how are we going to divide any money we get. And when I went into this, I told my county board, I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing it for justice. These people have gotten away with drug dealing to the scale it's killed hundreds of thousands of people, and they need to be held to account. And to do that, if they're going to give me money as a part of their accountability, I want every nickel to go directly to treatment.
Yeah.
Every nickel. But do it right. Don't screw that up. You can't just start opening treatment centers and, you're going to lose people. You're not going to do best practices.
Are you most effective in that quest as a county attorney, or would you be better suited, let's say, if you were the attorney general for the state of Minnesota?
Oh, I'd use that bully pulpit either place I have it. And I use the opportunity as county attorney to talk to the community members about those things that have us worried, our kids, how the elderly are being treated, vexatious crimes, auto thefts are through the roof.
Vexatious.
Shoplifting, all those kinds of crimes that reform people say, well, that's low-level, nonviolent, I'm not doing it. I happen to disagree strongly and say, no. There has to be fair accountability there, and part of it, invariably, is going to involve drugs or alcohol. Mm-hmm. I would guess, just anecdotally, 75-80% of my cases have either a direct or certainly an indirect connection to addiction or alcoholism or both.
Because it makes people stupid and nuts.
Right. People get drunk and they beat people, they rob people, they hurt people. And, I'll lock them up for that, and I have no problem doing that. If you hurt somebody, you're going to have to pay for that. At the same time, I don't want you doing it again. And if this doesn't cure you, maybe we should get at what's really making you crazy, which is sometimes, feeding that monkey on your back. Yep. And so I'm all for that. And I think when I do retire, I want to put a lot more time into this. I really do. I've learned a lot in 35 years.
So when you retire from your current job, you could just run for attorney general.
I could, but I choose not to run for. Politics and I don't get along that well.
That's why you'd be great at it.
But I'm closely watching the Hennepin County attorney's race, however, and I have some existential terror about that race. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But, I've got some really, really committed attorneys and staff in my office that really do care deeply about what we're doing. And that doesn't, you could say, well, that sounds like you guys are a bunch of reformists. We reform what needs to be reformed, but we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
We should all be reformists all the time.
That's exactly how I view it. And an easy one, and one I've been working on and still am for about 3 years, if we have the time, I could get into it.
Absolutely.
Is this concept of bail reform. Now, bail reform is an interesting topic, and the way it works in Minnesota is everyone has a constitutional right to have bail set when they're charged with a crime. Who decides how much bail? The prosecutor. Mm-hmm. At least they recommend it, and the judge almost invariably just follows it, right? And so it works like this. Say you and I both get arrested for the same crime. Let's say it's a domestic assault, although that never happened with you and me. But we both go to jail, and the judge says $5,000 bail to each one of us. Well, if I don't have $5,000, I have to call a bail bondsman, and they take 10%. So I'd have to give them $500 and then put up collateral. And then
Hang on. To catch the rest of this, you have to download my podcast because Pete and I are going to continue talking. But when we come back for the radio, folks, I'm going to talk with Courtney Daniels about breast cancer and the pink ribbon scam. Okay, keep going. Now we got all the time in the world because we're in podcast
So what
land.
I do is you and I have $5,000 bail. You don't have any money. You stay in jail. I've got $500 and enough collateral to cover the $5. I'm out.
Yep.
Well, what did that do for the victim's safety? What did that do for the community's safety? Nothing. Money bail has nothing to do with public safety. Well, could we do better than that? Instead of one guy has money, so he gets out of jail. The other doesn't, so he sits and grinds a time till trial. Are there better ways to do it? And
I had Dennis Smith, former state rep, who's running for attorney general. He was on last week talking about how he's against no cash bail.
Well, I would say to him, before you say that, and I had to evolve on this too, before you say that, take a look at some models. Now, New York, I think they threw the baby out with the bathwater. They're letting criminals out the door after charging them, and they keep reoffending, and that's made then national headlines. But if you look at a state like New Jersey essentially got rid of cash bail, and what they have there is if you are charged with a certain number of crimes that are below a line, so to speak, in other words, not a violent crime, you're presumed to be conditionally released. And the conditions can be many or few. Now, if you do a violent crime, say a rape, a homicide, anything with a gun, you don't get bail. You're staying in jail because you are a dangerous threat.
Yeah.
And I like that model because when they put somebody back out, they don't just say you're out. They say, I'm going to conditionally release you. You are not allowed to go by this person, this place, this, whatever your criminal behavior was involved in, we're going to keep you from doing it. We're going to make you come in and pee in a bottle and make sure you're not using again. And if you screw it up, you're back in jail. But, we want conditions that make sure we're safe and you'll come back for trial. And that can be very effective today. GPS is very effective. Ramsey County had a GPS program for domestic offenders. Because I always get worried the guy pays his money and goes back home and he's going to reassault his wife. Probably even more because she called the police.
Yeah, now he's pissed.
And so if you put a GPS on him, if he gets within, say, a mile of the house, she'll get alerted, typically, and so will the cops. And so now we can intervene.
Are the cops on top of it enough where they can intervene that quickly and be there? Because, my concern, government, they're busy, they're occupied, there's so much to do, and government sometimes sucks.
Sometimes, but I would say this, the cops I've been working with my whole career are really, really committed. And where in my community, when you call 911, they're going to get there right away. Yeah. Even if it's little, they respond. And I think they respond fairly, too. And when I talk to our sheriff about this, he thinks those kinds of conditional releases can be far better for the safety of the community than the cash system. Okay. And because what does cash do? Nothing. Although poor people stay in jail.
Right.
But what I want is, and right now, because the courts were closed, you're going to get a trial date a year from now. Yeah. And in the meantime, I say don't sit in a jail for a year because that would be pretty punitive when you haven't even been convicted yet. Yep. But you got to behave yourself. Yeah. And that means you got to quit running the racket with the booze or dope. You got to do some other things. You've got to follow some of these safety conditions so that we can be assured you won't act out again. Yep. I think that's a much better way to go than the current system of cash bail. I've been working on it. My friends got me in touch with the National Institute of Corrections, who's been doing a bail study for us and discussing with us best practices. I just think we can do better, and that's an easy one.
Who sets your rules? Does the county board set your rules, or does the legislature set your rules?
Well, the legislature sets the laws, and I obviously work to uphold those laws, but I'm given enough discretion to where I can do a lot of things in my role as county attorney. I don't like doing them alone. I like doing them with my colleagues, with my sheriffs and other professionals, police chiefs. So I don't just do edicts. I discuss it with them and say, here's the idea, and will you help me work on it? And it's always geared toward public safety. And so some people think, oh, well, that's some kind of hug a thug program and that. And I go, no. We're doing the right thing to the right person at the right time. That's what it's about. And if we stay focused on that and do it in a moral way, always worrying about public safety, and you can't put too many conditions on somebody or you're going to break them, but we can do better than what we do now. I want to do better than what we do now. And the obvious disparities in poor people sitting in jail, could go away.
First time I ran for office, I was 22, east side of St. Paul. Very young, very stupid. And I would joke with Ben Cruzy, famous podcaster, that I was going to promote a Hugs for Thugs program. and I was doing that derisively and as a joke. And it's so funny that 20 years of experience, wisdom, age, and some perspective of being an addict myself, what that'll do to your perception. Problems aren't easy. They're not simple.
No.
Well, they can be simple, but they're not easy. And just you're not going to get anywhere just locking people up forever. That's just not the answer.
I've tried.
For some people,
I tried for many years.
Should we put people in jail that we're afraid of or that we're mad at?
Yeah, I've heard that too. And I think there's some real truth to that.
Yeah.
If you stay focused on like I keep saying, you have to be held to account. I have to be held to account. We all do, but done in a fair manner.
Yeah.
And if it's unfair, you could break them, and then what have you got? But that has to be part of the solution. And I think we can think a little more broadly on how can we get public safety to be better, we all feel safer. And I've just found a couple of ideas, but there's been some other great ideas floating around. But in my view, it doesn't mean ignore these kinds of crimes as part of that solution. Yeah. I'm not going to buy that, but I am going to buy use the opportunity when you intervene with a potential criminal to find a way to get to that so we don't keep seeing them over and over and over again. But there are some who really do want to do life on the installment plan, and I'm fine with it. Yeah. I'll go right along with that.
I think that you can help some people.
Yeah. Some of the time.
And people have to. That's the tricky part. Like, especially with addiction, like you have to want it.
Yeah.
Like if you don't want to change, there's nothing anybody can do but lock you up.
Well, but I use that opportunity to go, okay, you've been arrested. You spent a night in jail maybe. This is a wake-up call, my friend.
Yep.
If you want to get off this merry-go-round, all you got to do is tell me.
Yep.
And I'll help you. And if you don't, well, then you're not ready. So you can do your jail time and then come back, and we'll do this dance again and again and again until you decide you want to surrender.
Thank you very much, Pete Orput. It's always great talking to you. I wish you nothing but the best, and I can't wait for you to announce your run for Attorney General.
Jack, it was great to see you again. As always, I really appreciate the opportunity to visit with you, and thank you and your listeners. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Ad break. I bet you thought I forgot about you. Go to jacktomczak.com and join my Patreon right now. I said right now.